Hello everyone, welcome again. In the last video we talked about a property of one of the important property of normal distribution, and I'm going to talk about that a little more. So what we talked about last time was that if this is a normal distribution curve, and this is the mean, there are events distributed. This is the mean. There are events distributed, which is plus minus 1 standard deviation away from the mean. This is plus 1 standard deviation, minus 1 standard deviation, plus 2 standard deviation, plus 3 standard deviation, minus 2 standard deviation, and minus 3 standard deviation. So and I talked about what it says is that if we move from plus minus 1 standard deviation away from the mean, we are covering about 68% of the occurrences. If we move from plus minus 2 standard deviation away from the mean, we are covering about 95% of the occurrences. And if we move plus minus 3 standard deviation from the mean, we are covering 99% of the occurrences. So okay, let me take an example. Suppose the volatility is 10%. What 10%? And this is a proxy for the standard deviation. As we said, for option prices, this is a proxy for the standard deviation. And what it says is that volatility is defined as 1 standard deviation price change in percentage over 1 year. So that's how volatility is used in conjunction with standard deviation. It is a 1 standard deviation price change in percentage over 1 year period. And if suppose we have an underline XYZ with the mean of $50. So what we can do is calculate what's 1 plus minus 1 standard deviation. So plus minus 1 standard deviation, that's 10%. So that would be plus minus 5. So we'll get a range of so plus 5, that this would be 55, minus 5, that would be 45. Plus minus 2 standard deviation, 20%, 2 standard deviation from the mean, that would be plus minus 10. So that would be 60, this would be 40, and similarly 3 standard deviation away from the mean, that would be 15. So this would be 65, and this would be 35. So now what does that mean? If I talk about this property, 1 standard deviation would cover 68% of the occurrences. That will mean that over a period of time, 68% of the time, the price of XYZ will remain between $45 and $55. If I take the property of 2 standard deviation, what means that 95% of the time the price of XYZ is going to remain between 2 standard deviations of the mean. That is, it is going to stay between $40 and $60. And if I take the third property, say for 99% of the time, 99% of the occurrences will within 3 standard deviations of the mean, that it means that over a period of 1 year the price of XYZ would remain between $35 and here $66. So this is what it means. This is the probability distribution as per how this is how we apply the theoretical pricing model into the normal distribution curve. Now again, this is important thing to remember is that volatility is 1 standard deviation price change over a 1 year period. Okay, and an important thing, a subtle difference to note about the mean that we talk about. I just took the mean as all this while I was saying that the mean is the present price of the underlying. But remember, in one of the earlier videos we talked about the arbitrage free market. I'll talk about this also a little more, but the mean should be the forward price. And in the arbitrage free market, where no money can be lost or made by the trading of the underlying, this is the forward price that should be the mean of this normal distribution curve. So if you recall what I talked about, suppose the underlying is $50 and the present interest rate at 8%, and we do a 3-month trade for this option. So we have to borrow those money to make this trade, and how much interest do we pay? We pay $1 of interest, and suppose after 3 months we get a dividend back of 50 cents. So the forward price would be $50 plus the money that we paid to borrow this money, and the dividend that we got. So $50.5, that is the forward price after 3 months. That is the mean of this normal distribution. So this is an important thing to note about this. And now another thing that I'll talk about is that even though the volatility, what I'm talking about is that everything in terms of price fluctuation of an underlying can be expressed in terms of normal distribution. That is not true in the real world. That this scenario is true under very strictly under very narrow guidelines, but this gives us an understanding to how we should proceed going forward, understand what volatility is. And in the later part we will talk more about volatility, but volatility in broad terms is the standard deviation of the normal curve. And there are 2 types of important volatilities that I'm going to talk about. There are historical volatility, which is mainly the historical price of the underlying. This is associated with the underlying. And then there is implied volatility, which is associated with the pricing of an option. So we're going to talk more about this in detail, but important distinction to note how this volatility came into picture. Historical volatility is the movement of the underlying, and implied volatility is how the price option is priced, assuming how the underlying is going to move in the future.